I think Martin is trying to connect, but he has probably some problem because.
Okay, I think that we may start already. Daniel?
So we can start, yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon for everyone. I'm here from Warsaw, capital of Poland. I hope that a lot of you have been in our country, maybe one day will arrive. So I would like to welcome on the Faculty of Political Science, International Studies, University of Warsaw. Basically, we can't see each other directly, but only via electronic media, via Zoom, via YouTube. So because we are living in the strange time, we are living in strange situation. I would like to welcome you in a special event in our faculty, the Biden administration and USA global strategy, the few seminars about the new president of USA and new opening of the USA. I would like to thank Aleksandra Jarczewska, Jakub Zajączkowski, the main organizers of this conference, to prepare this seminar, very connected in a now situation which happened in USA, a hot situation which happened in the USA. Yesterday was important day for all Americans. I think that now in our world, that was important day for all of us, because something is finished, something is begin, and you will talk during these few days about what will be in the future, how will be the future, how the political scientists see the future. Yesterday, I can't see the ceremony in Washington. Basically, was Senate at the University of Warsaw. But for me, was most important thing that is connection between art and politics that Lady Gaga sang during this ceremony. For me, this is important. How these two different parts of our life, culture and politics, are connected and coming each other and are important for our world. This is very interesting for me. I hope that maybe someone of you will see this special moment, that performance is kind of politics and politics is can be on the performance. So I hope that you have a very good time in this seminar, that a lot of guests have interesting papers, will be interesting discuss. For me, America is place when I have been 4 times. Especially Washington is like for European Greece, because it's connected with Greece, with Athens, was the beginning of democracy, and also for us, I think it's still place is full heart of democracy. And I believe in American democracy, also I believe in Polish democracy, and I believe of the world democracy. I hope that today seminar, a perspective of transatlantic relations, is good begin to discuss about Biden administration and US global strategy. I hope that will be good time, good presentation, and good luck for the next days. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean, for a very nice introductory speech. And now I would like to say a few words, and it is a great pleasure also for me to welcome all of you. We are almost 24 hours after inauguration of Joe Biden. But since last November, after election in the United States, it has started academic discourse on implications of the change in presidential administration for domestic and foreign policy of United States. Today, our faculty, together with our partners from New Zealand, Centre for Strategic Studies, University, Victoria University of Wellington, our partner from Israel, Center for National Security Studies, School of Political Science, University of Haifa, our partners from Czech Republic, Department of North American Studies, Charles University, from Mexico, CIDE, and also from United States, Polish European Academic Center for Exchange and Research, Northeastern Illinois University. Together, today we would like to begin, as Dean said, 4-part series of joint international seminars on the Biden administration and the US global strategy. We would like during the next few days, we would like to focus on the following areas. Today, of course, we'll start from transatlantic relations. And tomorrow we'll discuss on United States and Indo-Pacific. And the 25th on Monday we'll discuss on United States and Latin America. And the last but not least, on 26th November, on Tuesday, we would like to invite you for a seminar on the United States and the Middle East. During this seminars, during this next few days, our friends, colleagues, scholars from around the world, from New Zealand, Australia, via Europe, India, Israel to United States, will discuss on implications for different parts of the world of the change in presidential administration in the United States. We ask our colleagues to try to answer for three main questions. The first question is, what is the current state of the United States relations with selected region? So it's the first question. The second question, what expectations do states in the selected region hold regarding the Biden administration? And the last question, what possible major changes will Biden administration make in American foreign policy towards selected region? So I hope we'll try to answer, our panelists try to answer this question. But before I will give the screen to my colleague, Professor Jarczewska, I would like to thank Ola and also our partners in preparation with seminars. Benjamin Miller from University of Haifa, Professor Benjamin Miller, Professor Jan Hornat, and Christopher Kozak from Charles University, Jorge Schiavon from Mexico, and Roberto Rabel from New Zealand, from Victoria University of Wellington. And now I would like to give the floor to Professor Aleksandra Jarczewska, professor at our faculty in Department of Area and Global Studies. She's also co-president of the Polish and European Center for Exchange and Research at the Northeastern Illinois University, editor-in-chief of our journal Stosunki Międzynarodowe, International Relations. She focused in her research on transatlantic relations and US foreign policy. So Ola, screen is yours, and Ola will be a chair of today's seminar. Thank you very much, and once again, welcome all of you during our seminar.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this very nice introduction. Thank you, Mr. Dean, Professor Przastek, for the introduction. Thank you, Professor Zajączkowski, head of our Department of Area and Global Studies. As it already been mentioned, we now today begin the fourth series of seminar, or series of four seminar on the Biden's administration and US global strategy. So we want to discuss what we may expect, what are going to be the changes, or what can we predict at this stage with regard to the US foreign policy. And as the president stressed yesterday in his inaugural speech, one of the main goals of the new administration is to repair the US alliances and to engage with the world once again. So I think that this is a great time to talk about what can we expect from this new administration. So our main goal for this seminar and next 3 seminars that I hope we are all be able to participate in is to discuss with prominent experts from different parts of the world. We try to invite people from many places, from many academic centers, from whatever we could do. So the prominent experts will talk about Europe, Asia, Latin America, and also the Middle East. And we want to discuss what we can expect from this new administration. And today we decided to start with Europe and talk about perspectives on transatlantic relations. We decided to do that not only because the main idea for these seminars was born here in Poland, in Warsaw, and in the heart of Europe, but of course, because we strongly believe that no matter the significance of Asia and other regions in the US foreign policy and global strategy, Europe is still the closest ally of the United States with regards to values, common history, achievements, but also due to the needs and challenges of today's world. Just to mention the pandemic, the populism and threats to democracy, the problem of climate change and new technology threats, and many, many others that Europe, the United States, and other countries face today. Moreover, it is worth to stress that regardless the fact that Barack Obama was considered to be the first Asian president, most probably Joe Biden will most likely be the last European president, as we may guess. So this is a chance for Europe and for Europeans to take advantage of this fact and try to intensify efforts to strengthen the transatlantic relations. That's why today, discussion on perspectives for transatlantic relations, we invited prominent experts from both United States and European countries. So let me just briefly introduce the speakers in order of their presentations today. Ambassador Cameron Munter, I'm not sure if everyone can see Ambassador, but I hope. Former US diplomat who served in Pakistan, Serbia, Iraq, and was also National Security Council Director in the Clinton and Bush White Houses. Professor Małgorzata Zachara-Szymańska, the faculty member of the Institute of American Studies and Polish Diaspora, Faculty of International and Political Studies, Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Dr. Krzysztof Kozak, a deputy head of the Department of North American Studies, Faculty of Social Sciences at the Charles University in Prague. Dr. Gordon Friedrichs, the representative of Heidelberg Center for American Studies, the Heidelberg University. And Professor Martin de Bruyn, chair of the Department of Political Science and Northeastern Illinois University. I know that Professor Martin de Bruyn has some problems with his camera, so I'm not sure if he can be visible on the screen, but I hope we can hear him. So Martin, can you say hello? Can you, because most probably people on YouTube will not see you. Hello?
Hello. Yes, hello. Yes. Hi. Sorry, I have some issues, but I'm using my phone. So if it's a little bit less stable, I hope it will work. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much, Ola, for organizing this wonderful seminar series.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you could stay with your camera on, that would be nice, because then you will be visible on YouTube streaming. So this is quite complicated from the technical side, but I hope this will work. So we will begin with short introductory remarks of our experts, and then we will move to open discussion and Q&A session. And before we will proceed, I will give some technical information for our guests and participants on YouTube, because this may be quite confusing. So if someone is watching us on YouTube, you may already ask questions via chat on YouTube. And to be able to do so is just to click the registration box or button and give your name and surname, and then ask the question. And we would also appreciate if you could use or indicate your institutional affiliation, because this will help us to proceed. So just after this short introduction, I would like to ask speakers to give their remarks on the future and expectation with regard to transatlantic relations. So let's start with Ambassador Munter.
The crowds are cheering, I can tell already. Yes, thank you very much, Ola, for this opportunity. And I'll try to be very brief and direct because we have some great speakers here. I was also, you introduced me as being someone who was in places like Pakistan and Iraq, but I also served twice in the fine city of Warsaw. And so I do hope to have some perspective for the way things are there. Look, the new administration coming in is going to have an overwhelmingly domestic focus. That's the first thing to think. For all of Joe Biden's international experience, his main challenges are domestic and his main energy will be domestic. For that reason, the very difficult situation at home will be the first thing on his mind. That said, in many ways, we have a group of people who will be working in the administration who are very much in tune with what Joe Biden thinks. This is not a group of rivals. This is not a group of people like, say, Hillary Clinton or other people who in previous cabinets have had their own power bases. These are all people who are dependent on Joe Biden. They're people who've staffed Joe Biden. They're people who worked with Joe Biden. You're not going to have people competing, with the possible one exception of John Kerry, that no one really knows. You're not going to have people competing with the Biden agenda. Personnel is policy here. The people who he has put in place, let's take the State Department. Tony Blinken, very well versed in European affairs, in fact, ran Bill Clinton's European operation at the White House years ago and has worked for years with the great and the good in Europe. Tony is one of the people who speaks a foreign language. He speaks French, studied in France. His deputy, Wendy Sherman, very experienced in democratic politics. And then the third in line is the Undersecretary at the State Department, Toria Nuland, former ambassador to NATO. These are, for example, the three powerhouses that are all focused on Europe. They're all, interestingly, married to intellectuals. Bob Kagan, the significant American neoconservative, is married to Toria Nuland. Bruce Stokes, a very important public opinion maker, is married to Wendy Sherman. In other words, these are old establishment figures and very highly focused on Europe. In fact, when you think of the biggest challenge overseas for America being China, it's striking that most of the people, even Lloyd Austin going to the Pentagon or Bill Burns going to the CIA, none of these people are China experts. Rather, you have a bunch of European experts. Now, what does this mean to be a European expert? This is, in my opinion, not good for people who are on what I would call more on the periphery of Europe. They are people who are very much focused on the core of Europe. You can look to Tony Blinken, you can look to Wendy Sherman, you can look to Toria Nuland and the people who work with them to focus on the institutions of the EU and NATO and the capitals of Paris, London, Berlin, and Brussels. This is something that I think is going to be a bit of a throwback. And these people are very aware that some are wondering whether it will be a restoration or an attempt to restore an old American hegemony, an old American attitude working with Europe from the 1990s. And it's something these people are very aware of. But nonetheless, that's where they formed their ideas about what will happen. They will focus on issues that they can solve with Europeans. And when they say Europeans, they're talking about multilateral institutions. There will be much less focus on what does Warsaw think, what does Belgrade think, what does Valletta think. And so the people on, I will get back to what I think the people on the more, on the edges of Europe are going to have to do to get their attention. They have an agenda which is going to be abstract. It's not going to be what happens in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's not going to be what happens in Ukraine. It's going to be four things. And this is what they've worked out with Ursula von der Leyen. The four items they'll work on will be the pandemic, climate change, trade, and digital governance. Now, all of those are fine issues and important issues, but what's interesting in foreign policy, for those who have worked in foreign policy, is crises and surprises never come because you're talking about an abstract notion. They come because, you know, Mr. Erdogan does something, or Mr. Putin does something, or other kinds of problems arise. So they will come trying to look at the broad outlines of how to deal with the pandemic, how to deal with climate change, the differences of Americans on the way that the big tech works in global digitalization, the problems that were manifest in the trade relationship of Trump. They will do it through multilateral institutions. Therefore, first and foremost, for the people in Europe, I think it's important you must also work through these multilateral institutions and address these kinds of issues. Do not expect a trip to Slovenia anytime early in the president's time. It's just not, I just don't think that's going to happen. So it'll be institutions above regions, and it'll be the center over the periphery. This to me is laudable, because what it does is it plays to the strength of people who are for the transatlantic relationship to rebuild how Europe and America don't have problems, but rather can be partners in dealing with global issues. But the big area, as was mentioned earlier, that is seen as a problem in the world by the Americans is China. And the people who are running the foreign policy are not China experts, they're Europe experts. And so they will look at China through Europe. I see that as probably a good thing, being someone who cares about having a joint American-European attitude. But just because you want to do this doesn't mean it's going to happen. There are going to be other rocky parts of the road, which is that many of these people are very, very committed to a traditional American commitment to human rights, which is something that the previous administration didn't deal with. So that countries that are perceived as having, let's say, problems, I won't mention any names, but that with their judicial systems or with the free press, they're going to get attention they may not like in Europe. And so this will be something that countries in Europe will have to take into account, that the Americans will talk more about human rights than they did in the past. And again, that they'll have their main things they're focusing on. The final point I would like to make is that I think it really is a remarkably experienced, and the way they like to put it among themselves, they will be predictable and boring. I'm not sure the world is going to be predictable and boring, but there will be every effort to have a cool, a restrained, a predictable kind of style. And if you looked at Tony Blinken's appearance before the Senate yesterday, or if you've heard Joe Biden talking about foreign policy, or if you've ever been in a room with Wendy Sherman, you will realize these people will be very straightforward. They won't be shrill. I think you're going to see an enormous change in style. And it's going to be up to the Europeans, and especially the people on the periphery of Europe, whether that style turns into substance. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your remarks. And yes, I think we all agree that people are the most important, because we know that institution cannot exist without people, and people are going to be crucial for their developments. And thank you so much for outlining a broad picture of possible developments. I think it's really crucial to see the picture in broader perspective. So for now, we will move to Professor Małgorzata Zacharasz-Szymańska from Jagiellonian University, and please be free to share your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is a wonderful occasion, and congratulations on organizing it. So I'd like to say a little bit about transatlantic relations in more abstract terms, because Mr. Ambassador explained excellently what it is going to happen probably between these two shores of the Atlantic Ocean in terms of operational strategy, in terms of policy making, in terms of style, which is of course really important. But what's in the bottom of these steps is a vision, and this is something I think we lacking now. And this is partially the reason why what we've been observing for the last some would say 2 decades. It's this transatlantic divergence. So divergent interests, divergent values, divergent styles of politics and approaches to global and local issues. So I would like us also to elaborate a little bit on the meaning of the transatlantic as a concept, because we use this concept instinctively, and we of course we realize that this is all the time, you know, an evolving agenda, and this is a work in progress. So it would be good for the. I think it would be beneficial for our discussion to establish what transatlantic really means at the moment, and I'd like to analyze this or try to tackle this issue on 3 levels. Obvious 3 levels, 3 components of this transatlantic concept based on historical records, of course, between 2 parties. So so what's symbolic and what's what can be linked to common values. This is the first level, and this is an obvious level because we all know that because we all know that this relation started when the Americas were discovered by Europeans, and in a way they were created by Europeans as a part of the world, not as a, you know, as a state, not as an idea, but as a part of the global reality. Margaret Thatcher once said that Europeans are a product of history. Europe is a product of history, while the United States is a product of philosophy, and this is true. But an important thing happened when, in the 15th century, Americas were discovered, because it meant a connection. And as early as in this moment, this global context appeared, because then what happened after, they were able to develop an empire, a really global in reach. So this was a real connection between, they basically created a whole new world. And of course, it was not a joint endeavor, because Europeans, they brought a lot of suffering and a lot of exploitation, and they just used resources. And we all know the story. But this was something which is a part of common history, and this led what to the next chapters of this common history, and of course American independence, and we now getting to the second level of the meaning of transatlantic, which is commonality of interest. So we try to develop our policies together, I mean Europe and America, because we assume that we've got common interests. But when we look at that, let's say, bilateral, not in the sense between countries, between states, but between the United States and the, Europe as a joint entity relation, it's always been a lot of competition between these parties. So what is in this assumption of what is the essence of this assumption of joint interest is that the United States and Europe, they have always had this joint vision of how the world should be organized. So this joint interest and joint vision, which for me is the third level of the meaning of the transatlantic, is created and always has been created in relation to the global realities. And this is really important, especially now, because we know what's happened in the past, and we can find a number of examples to support this thesis and also to oppose this, of course. But now we in the moment, I mean, the United States are in the moment, and also the European Union, when we observing increasingly that globalization as a major political project is in retreat. So there is more and more difficult to organize the world the way both parties would like to organize it. And it's not to say that it was easier back in this, in the age of commerce, in the age of discoveries, like between 15th and 18th century. It is not to say that it was easier throughout the 20th century, but we've been observing this clear vision. So throughout this 20th century, during this march to establish an empire, an American empire, we had this basic notion of what is the program for the future, what is this vision for the world to be organized, which was, of course, an open market and democracy and promotion of liberal values, and both parties agree that this is the key. But what we've been observing recently is a kind of failure of this project, and there is nothing to replace this, this story about how to conquer or how to create the new world in the future. So this is the major problem that I see within transatlantic relations at the moment, that there is, we're facing lack of vision. So I don't know really what's the idea, the meta idea, the major idea for the future for this both parties. And for me, the major visionary project, the last visionary project, transatlantic project of this scale, potential scale, and of this importance was transatlantic trade and investment partnerships. And I really hope that this is something that is going to be a priority for this administration, and also for administration in Europe, because this is really the idea, and this is I see it as a kind of project that can bring leverage, that can bring a shift, that can that can change the rules of the game in the global political scene. So it bears the potential for the change to happen. So that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this interesting introductory remark. As I understand it, Professor Zahara Szymańska is calling for a new opening with regard to creating or finding a new vision for transatlantic relations, as the old one maybe is not the current one. And Professor also mentioned the TTIP idea negotiated under Obama administration, and I think that we will have time to talk about this later today and go back to this topic, because it's really interesting how the economic cooperation may evolve under this administration. So let's just leave it for now and move to our next presenter, who is Dr. Krzysztof Kozak. From Charles University in Prague. So Krzysztof, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me and organizing this event. I really enjoy hearing your perspective, and I'm looking forward to the other debate. And we should enjoy the pandemic as we can, as imagine of all the CO2 that we just saved by organizing this online. So. Let's get to it. What I would add to the first question of what is the current state of U.S.-European relations, I think it's really important to remind us that the primary thing from the U.S. perspective is that Europe is not really a threat, and I think this has some fundamental value in the thinking of the U.S. national security experts, and I think this security community that has been built has a great value that I think the people in the Biden administration really appreciate, and especially as Ambassador Munter said, taken from the more global perspective, the strategic and geostrategic alliance in that sense is very valuable, and I think this leads to the second question. So this is the fundament, but the second question is related to these expectations, and I think people who are following it closely, I think they realize what an opportunity really presents here in terms of transatlantic relations, because if we look at the transatlantic coalitions, the Democratic Party under Biden, especially his team, they are all very much pro Atlantic. They are great Atlanticists. And in that sense, they are much closer to some European views on regulations, and the fact that Joe Biden will, for 2 years, the administration is going to have majority in U.S. Congress, also is a pretty unique opportunity to get things moving. And I hope that European leaders realize that, and I'm pretty sure the Americans on the other side of the Atlantic also realize that. Because on some level, Trumpism might come back in a new shape or form. The forces of sort of nationalism, of this like great power politics, hardcore realism, it turns out they are pretty popular in U.S. politics. It's and nobody can guarantee that such a great constellation for transatlantic relations is going to last. The same goes. For sort of we were talking about it. The generation of people who are going to be there. It's unique that they had these European experiences and connections. So the opportunity is definitely there, and I hope it is sensed on both sides of the Atlantic. What I would add to it, I would add like 2 more lines that I think we should be speaking about. And the first one is really focuses on collective memory. And because if we are talking about sort of like shared values and even moral compass, in a sense, it often goes to the horrors of World War II, and there have been and in the shaping of collective memory, it is an important event, but maybe sometimes we don't realize that it's really fading away. That the new generations, my students, for them it's really a long time. It's really becoming outdated, but maybe in times of crises, it's really important to revisit what sorts of lessons can we draw from our history. So I think healthy attention to collective memory and even to history education should really help to should really help to reinvigorate the transatlantic relationship, so that we really realized what are some of the core ideas that we want to preserve even in the 21st century. And the last point I would really highlight in this context is the potential for a sort of transatlantic Green New Deal. That if we are really serious about climate change, which is becoming a sort of boring topic because it's like the effects are sort of gradual and it really rarely captures the headlines. But in a sense, there is a great opportunity in terms of the Green New Deal to really transform both the European and the American society towards a vision that we heard about. That and maybe one of these like potential visions is really sort of driven by sort of positive future that includes energy independence, that includes the renewables. The political fight for that will be very dramatic. Like the fossil fuel industry is very strong, and in a sense, the great power rivalry, all sort of escalation of conflicts with China, they won't help the climate negotiations one small bit. So, and that's why I think it's highly important. And given the positive constellation that now exists, that there is a lot of room to move forward and create a sort of transatlantic vision that would stand up and set even I wouldn't be afraid of setting even environmental standards on the global scale, and that would prove even geopolitically, I think, very useful. So I think we should be hearing and talking more about it from that perspective. And the last sentence is, I think Donald Trump really damaged the whole idea of cooperation. It almost became a sort of dirty word. So I think Europe and the US now are in the best position to sort of restore the idea that cooperation on the international scale is even possible, that you don't have to be competing all the time, and let's hope they will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kozak, for your remarks and indicating the opportunities that exist in the transatlantic relations still, which we believe strongly in. So I think that the most important is to really think about restoring this cooperation, and not to think about foreign policy as President Trump thought, as the transactional beat, but to think about what can be really done by multilateral approach and restoration of alliances. So let's move to Dr. Gordon Friedrichs from Heidelberg Center for American Studies at the Heidelberg University. So the view from Germany. Gordon?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the introduction and for organizing all of this. Very much appreciated, happy to be here. So I listened to our Secretary of State last night, Heiko Maas, and the one word that he repeatedly used when he talked about the new Biden administration was hope. So Germany at this point in time is hoping that things will turn out as they think could be fruitful in the future. So overall, Germans are quite excited that there is a transition of power from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. When you look at the most recent polling data, you can see that that the likability and the favorability of the U.S. Perception is spiking in contrast to the Trump administration, I think by 50%, right? So the likability of the US is increasing. So that is a lot of potential, of domestic support for the Biden administration to perhaps leverage to a certain extent. But it also, I think, comes with a certain set of expectations that are tied to it. And let me just make three larger points. Okay, so first of all, I think for Germany right now, the most important goal is to rebuild the economy post-pandemic, right? So, and therefore, trade with the US, is key in that strategy, in that goal to rebuild the economy. With this range of executive orders that the Biden administration has issued yesterday, first day in office, one was not among them was to get rid of the Trump tariffs on steel and aluminum, right? They remain in place. And so far, the Biden administration has not signaled that those tariffs will be changed in the future, right? So that is one area in which Germany will, voice and articulate certain expectations that, tariffs have to be removed in order to, move forward. The second element or the second reality, so to speak, is of course the EU-China investment treaty, which, the Merkel administration and Merkel in person have pushed forward quite hard, right, to get done after 7 years of negotiations. And obviously there is also, the promise and the expectation by the German leadership that with that investment treaty, German and EU trade with China will be on a more equal playing field. It is also an attempt by the European Union to bind China to a certain set of trade regulations and rules, which the US under the Trump administration was not willing and to a certain extent also not capable of doing so, right? And that is a certain reality that the incoming Biden administration has, has to face, but also has already addressed. When you look at Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, he recommended the Europeans to not ratify the EU-China investment treaty and instead talk to the Americans first. As you know, the investment treaty has to be ratified by the European Parliament. It has not that has not happened yet, but it will eventually. And the question is, how capable will the Biden administration be in changing the minds of the Europeans? I expect it will not be successful in doing so. I think another element of rebuilding the German economy and also the European economy is, of course, to think about some sort of trade standards with the US in the future, right? So I wouldn't rule out that there will be some debate about a transatlantic free trade agreement or the renegotiation of the transatlantic trade and investment partnership. That I think will become more possible after the election in Germany, which will take place in September this year, I assume. But the main issue is that, of course, the EU has, taken a stance on some intellectual property rights in the past. It has ruled against certain tech giants in the United States on how they try to, get a grip on the European continent. So the idea would be to harmonize and regulate EU and US trade standards in the future. I think against the background of the tariffs, right? I think this could be something moving forward, and it could be a strategy by the Germans and also by the Europeans to avoid, something like the trade policy under the Trump administration in the future, right? To establish a certain set of rules and regulation in which tariffs, become a little bit more prohibited. But of course, there is a problem with that. First of all, there is skeptical sentiment in Germany, domestic skeptical sentiment vis-a-vis free trade agreement, and that has not vanished. And also, and that's why I'm a little bit skeptical whether we could really argue that the Trump administration is resembling a restoration of this establishment, democratic establishment, that we have seen in the past under the Obama and the Clinton administration. In certain personnel, I totally agree, but in other respects, I don't. When you look at, Kamala Harris with the historic, first African-American, Asian-American female vice president, but also Pete Buttigieg and other members of the executive branch, I think it is also a signal to the left in the US that the Biden administration is listening to progressive Democrats, and that will come with a certain baggage vis-a-vis foreign policy. And the other reality is, of course, Nord Stream 2. The Merkel administration is supportive of the pipeline, of the construction of the pipeline. She has dismissed the sanctions threat by the US. And to a certain extent, that is the German answer to investing in alternative energies, or not alternative energies, but at least an answer to, getting out of coal energy and nuclear energy, right? By investing more in gas, or securing at least some sort of energy through the gas pipeline with Russia. And I think the US under the Biden administration, to a certain extent, has to decide whether to approach the issue of Nord Stream 2 from a national security perspective, in terms of containing and deterring Russia, or empowering energy security on the European continent. The second broader theme is, of course, that Germany has certain expectations of US leadership going forward. And just briefly, let me summarize 5. First, of course, that the US follows more diplomatic a more diplomatic strategy instead of a punitive, transactionalist-driven foreign policy, right? And the idea is that, of course, the German government, but also the European Union, wants to have a say in whatever US leadership is in the future, right? So therefore, diplomacy is what Germany expects of the US. Also a commitment to NATO, and also to prioritize the integrity and the stability of NATO, in contrast to the demands by the US that every NATO member should have at least 2% of their GDP spending on defense, right? So I think it's a matter of preference that I think Germany expects, right? The third one is a recommitment to the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. I think this is also something that the German government expects the Biden administration to commit to in some form. The other is being open to a reform of the WTO, particularly as an institutional response to the Trump administration's attempt of US decoupling from China. I think that reintegrating China and dealing with China and Chinese trade practices through the WTO is a preference by the German government, but it also comes with the idea that the WTO has to be reformed in some way or the other going forward. And the last expectation is democracy promotion and an active support of fight against nationalism and populism. So Heiko Maas, our Secretary of State, has come up with this idea of the Marshall Plan to rebuild American democracy, which I think was just an ill-advised idea. But in general, the idea is that democracy promotion is not only something that is connected to state building in failed states far away, but also within democracies. And let me wrap up by laying out 3 challenges to those expectations, to those German expectations vis-a-vis the Biden administration. The first one is there will be national elections in Germany, and we will potentially have a change in government with regard to the ruling coalition. So far we have the Christian Democratic Party and the Social Democratic Party as the ruling coalition. It's possible that this will end in September, and we will have a Christian Democratic coalition with the Green Party, and that could change a German foreign policy quite a bit. The second challenge is that although we have in the Christian Democratic Party solved the issue of who is in charge of the party last week with the election of Armin Laschet as a successor to Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, we don't have solved the issue of who will be the next candidate for chancellor. So it's possible that Armin Laschet will be the candidate, but it's also possible that that we will have someone from Bavaria, Söder, who is a much more conservative, or a representative of a much more conservative wing in the Christian Democratic Party. And that has consequences for the future of German foreign policy, for instance, with regard to a tougher stance on China or on Nord Stream, right? So who will be the candidate for chancellery in the Christian Democratic Party? And the last and probably the most crucial challenge to those expectations is the relationship between the German government and the German businesses and industry sector. Because we have a pro-Chinese sentiment among German businesses and a degree of scaredness of US secondary sanctions with regard to projects such as Nord Stream 2 and other issue areas regarding to the JCPOA, for instance. We have one German company who has already pulled out from the construction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, Belfinger, and they issued essentially that we are scared of US secondary sanctions and therefore we pull out, right? So this relationship between the German business sector in rebuilding the German economy and the German government, I think, is a challenge in the next couple of months that could shift the expectations, the German expectations, and also the room of leverage and bargaining capacity vis-a-vis a Biden administration in those areas that I just laid out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Friedrichs. Thank you for presenting the German perspective on transatlantic relations and possible challenges. I think that the most important will be the results of election and the so-called post-Merkel Europe after this election. So this is really challenging for both sides, and we will need to wait for these results. And now we will move to the United States, and Professor Martin de Bruyn will present the US perspective on the transatlantic relations. So, Professor, the floor is yours, or the screen is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, when you go last, most of your thunder has been stolen by your fellow presenters, but that's good, because that means we have actually a lot of connecting points and a lot of points. So I actually like to go back to one earlier point that Ambassador Munter mentioned in the very beginning, which is that the Biden administration will have very much domestic priorities. And so there are international implications of those domestic priorities, but he will very much be focusing on domestic issues, and while at the same time, the EU, the European Union, is very much waiting for the United States to return to the proverbial empty chair, right? I mean, the U.S. leadership has been lacking for 4 years, and they want that leadership to return. And so that would be kind of a challenge, right? How can Europe, how can Brussels, get the attention and can get the Biden administration to commit to many things that are international rather than being very much a domestic president. And so that's one of the challenges. This challenge is actually made more difficult because the EU has a lot of internal divisions. My background, I'm actually not an expert on American politics, but I actually focus on Europe, and particularly on the European Union. And the European Union, surprisingly, is more divided post-Brexit than it was, prior to Brexit, right? So it really hasn't helped. Traditionally there have been some north-south divisions. This particularly came to the forefront during the sovereign debt crisis. But we see now also a lot of east-west divisions, sort of getting, division getting worse, particularly again in the area of democracy and rule of law. And so this is an issue that might actually sort of be pushed a little bit more because the word democracy was, the key word in Biden's address yesterday. He talked a lot about democracy, and he said, democracy is back. Democracy has survived, and so this is important. And the European Commission is also very much committed to this idea of democracy and sort of and having tangible measures on what it means to be a democracy and what means. So this is something that will have to play out. So there are many good signs, right? So there are many signs that there will be a positive, that this will be, that it will be a positive, relationship between the transatlantic partners. And many of the things that have already been mentioned, obviously Biden wants to rejoin the Paris agreements, takes climate change very serious. He wants to go back to the Iran nuclear deal, which is, is important for the Europeans as well. He's interested in trade, wants to re-engage with the World Trade Organization, So that's an important aspect. He's a strong proponent of NATO, which is, again, is another important aspect. He's not going to call it obsolete. And then even in a philosophical way, an area where domestic American politics might be more aligned with domestic European politics, Biden is a strong opponent of capital punishment. And for Europe is the major opponent and driver of the anti-capital punishment movement in the world. And so for those two values to be aligned, and to see the strong difference between, obviously, the Trump administration, which was executing unprecedented number of people, over the last few weeks, this is an important philosophical alignment. Then there are also areas where there might be difficulty. Obviously the pandemic has made most states more inward looking. And so, we see that within the European Union, there has been very little leadership come out of Brussels, vis-a-vis leadership that comes out of some of the European capitals. And states have been doing their own thing. States have been closing the border. States have been trying to deal with this in their own way, which again makes it harder, right? It goes back then to that age-old question, about the Henry Kissinger question. If you want to call Europe, who do you call, right? Who's answers for Europe? Is it the European Commission? Is it Angela Merkel? Well, not for very long anymore, right? Is it who is the person who is going to pick up that phone and who are they going to speak for? I think that is still an important question that remains to be answered, particularly now that Europe is divided, so much over so many issues. And the United States is not particularly united, right? The United States is not that much more united, right? We obviously know that 70 million people voted for Trump in the last election. That's a lot of people, right? That's a lot of people who shared his perspectives, who shared his approaches, and who do not necessarily expect a return to normal, right? If that exists, where there would be, U.S. would be this sort of, international player again, and all that comes with it. So, this is these internal divisions might actually upend any kind of effort towards cooperation, right? So this is something that we have to watch very carefully. In terms of, maybe in terms of ethics, so substantive areas, one area where I think there can be also divisions is approaches on how to approach technology companies. And that is an area I think the Commission has been much more willing to clamp down on businesses and really try to regulate industries much more so than traditionally has been the case in the US. And so this will be very interesting to see if the Biden administration is willing to do that, willing to actually regulate Facebook and Twitter and such companies, and to hold them to certain standards, which they have not been held to, and which led to, among other things, the crisis that we're now in, and particularly, the lies and things that have been spread so widely. The start is good, as I mentioned. Joe Biden was elected. He immediately reached out to European heads of state and institutions, such as NATO, started connecting with them. Ursula von der Leyen, the council president, immediately said Europe has a friend in Biden, right? And very much these statements came out. Even the Commission came out with a new EU-US agenda for global change, right? They came out with a little report, sort of like, hey, here are the issues. Here's what we want to talk with you about. Again, whether they can be successful will very much depend on whether they can be internally united, right? Being united was the theme, and besides democracy, that Biden stressed. But it's also really the theme that should be the theme for Europe as well. If they can unite, if they can work towards a common agenda, if both sides are united, then there's much more chance that they will be successful internationally to come some kind of agreements. So those are my few minutes of response.
Thank you so much, Professor De Bruyn. Thank you for your rather optimistic vision and perspective on transatlantic relations. We can now move to discussion and question and answer session. As we can see, there is many participants on our Zoom meeting. So I think that there are many of participants who would like to ask questions, and it can be done in two ways. So one is just to give me a sign. Maybe it would be most convenient to give me a sign on chat that you would like to ask question, or you may just type your question on the chat. So then I'll be able to ask the question to presenters. So I'd like to open the discussion, and are there anyone who would like to start with questions, comments on what already was said? Okay. Barbara Regulska, Dr. Barbara Regulska from Department of Area and Global Studies.
First of all, thank you very much for a very, very interesting discussion, and that we had an opportunity to hear about something that is actually happening right now. For me, it was very interesting that we concentrated on these ideas and about the concepts of the future Euro-Transatlantic relations. But as I mainly focus always on economic side of American relations, I would love to ask you, what do you think about TTIP or other trade agreement? I don't want to stick to TTIP too much. We mentioned that a few times here, but nowadays we know that there are so many different problems concerning COVID, economic challenges, immigration challenges, and of course impeachment, etc., etc. So what do you think, what is the possible real perspective for today for any kind of free trade agreement? I'm not, as I said, I'm not strictly talking only about TTIP, but any kind of different integration, deeper integration between European Union and the United States. I would love to hear something from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this question. Barbara, would you like to direct this question to anyone in particular, or is it a general question to all of our participants?
I think it's a general. I mean, I'm as I also know something about American politics. I know that there is not a certain answer. It's just like divagations about what we think. So for me, it would be just interesting to hear some other observations than only mine. So every voice would be for me added value.
Okay, thank you so much. So anyone who would like to start? Okay, Małgorzata Zachara-Szymańska, professor, please.
All right, so thank you very much for your question. Would I think that any kind of free trade agreement would be very much desirable for the stability of the core concept of globalization and global governance with, Americas and European Union in it. But being realistic, I don't see the short-term perspective for this. So I cannot. So we don't know what the future brings, of course, but this is a huge project, and we've all seen, observing the process during Obama administration, how it was hard to come to the conclusion, how many different and clashing perspectives and understanding of the world were connected to the process of negotiating this. So so it also depends on if the view on the position of was the leadership strategy of both parties evolve or not, because what we're observing now, and these two things are really very much connected, is that global leadership is costly. So that's why we observing this growing reluctance in terms of taking leadership roles. And of course, when you would like to hold this place of a global leader, you need to create your rules of engagement. And this trade agreement would have this consequence. But I don't see the necessary attention and intention that could be invested in such a project, unfortunately, as I said.
Thank you so much for this remark. Ambassador Munter, would you like also to respond to this question?
Very briefly, I agree that it's not likely for a couple of reasons. I think Professor Friedrich said that the issue about the reform of the WTO and the broader questions simply beyond a bilateral pact mean that the Americans, I think, would go about this as one of many issues rather than having the concentration necessary to do it as just a simple bilateral pact. So I don't think it would be, think it would be the first things the American would do. They would talk about trade with China, trade with the WTO, and not go back to Europe. Secondly, Biden has only a 50-50 tie in the Senate, and any agreement that was up for Senate ratification would be very, very difficult with a Senate that's that close.
Thank you so much. And other presenters, anyone would like to comment on this? Or shall we move to the next question? Okay, so we have Professor Ulatowski who would like to ask questions. So Professor, if you could turn your camera on.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. Rafał Ulatowski from the University of Warsaw. I have three questions. First two questions to Ambassador You started your presentations talking about a concentration, potential need of the Biden administration to concentrate on internal policy. So my question, maybe our expectations toward the Biden administration are generally exaggerated, and they will simply concentrate more on internal things that are also that they have to do. My second question also goes to you. You say that in the new administration, most of the politicians are have European experience, and there is nobody who is expert on China. My question, is it a good situation for the United States and also for Europe, for other partners of the United States, when in the administration there is no real expert on China, and China is so important today? And my third question goes to Dr. Friedrichs. In your presentation, you scheduled a picture of Germany who wants to be a friend of everyone, a friend of the United States, a friend of China, and even a friend of Russia. Is it possible today? And can Germany continue this policy? What is your view? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your questions. So the first question goes to Ambassador Munter.
Okay, once again, I'll try to keep it brief. On the internal focus of the administration, I say that because it will be the internal focus of the president and the politics that take place. The vice president, who is very much a domestic politician, the people in the Senate. The team, however, I don't mean to say that they won't pay much closer attention to foreign policy. The team is much more experienced and capable than the Trump team. I mean, it's fair to say, you know, without trying to be insulting, it was definitely what we would call the junior varsity, the B team that signed up with Trump. The intelligent and critical Republicans were mostly among the never Trumpers who would not work with Trump. So you have a much more experienced, much better quality team of people, and they will be able to do a lot of things. So I would urge my European friends, and I'm living in Europe right now, yes, have high expectations and hold the Americans to those high expectations. I think that people like Tony Blinken and Bill Burns are about the best people we have. Let's see if we can do it. Secondly, on the question of China, even though I said that the people at the top are not China experts, there is a deep reservoir of people beneath the surface who are very good. And so again, the reason I mentioned the Eurocentrism of most of the leaders is to let the Europeans know that they will not somehow be pushed aside. There's going to be a European focus, but there's a lot of talent. And the main name you'll hear is a gentleman named Kurt Campbell, who was in the Obama administration working on China, a very tough guy who is basically the Indo-Pacific coordinator. And if you hear that term, you hear India, you hear Australia, you hear Japan, you hear America, primarily gives you a focus of containment and focusing on military issues. There's a team of people who know about China, and it may not be at the top of the agenda. I think the first agenda item is repairing the relationship with Europe. But there are some people, Laura Rosenberger, other people in the NSC who are quite good. I'd like to add one more point that struck me when I heard what Professor Kozak said about the generational change. One of the things that's important about this group is that these are people who, for example, when I was the director of the office in the 1990s on the first round of NATO enlargement, these are people I worked with. I worked with Tony Blinken, I worked with Wendy Sherman. All these people were part of this. And the leaders we were working with when we were trying to get Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic into NATO were leaders that remembered the Second World War. People like Helmut Kohl, people like Mitterrand, people like, you know, some of the senior politicians in the United States. That wave of focus on such things as what is NATO going to become, that is generationally determined. And this generation, even though they are younger, even though Tony Blinken is not someone who remembers the Second World War, he's very much imbued with that traditional spirit that came from what I associate with the 1990s and the first round of NATO enlargement. Most Europeans and most Americans don't share that generational memory. And so I think it's an important point, and I think others have mentioned this, coming up with a narrative that's common can't rely on the fact that we are so horrified by what happened in the Second World War that we won't ever let it happen again. We have to have a narrative about common interests and common values that doesn't rely on that deep emotional well that we could rely on 30 years ago. So I think that Professor Kozak is right on in focusing on the question of, are we able to use this to find a new generational level, generational language? Joe Biden's not going to. He's of the old generation. But are the rest of us able to do that?
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I believe that two next questions were directed to Professor Friedrichs. Gordon?
Yeah, sure. So I think in a nutshell, the question was, is Germany too friendly for the reality of the world? And I cannot speak for the German government, whether that is their sentiment and their vision, that they want to be loved and the friend of everyone. I think I can only recall what our former Secretary of State and now President of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, once wrote in Foreign Affairs, and he titled his essay with "Germany is a reflective power." And with that concept, I think the German ruling coalition has essentially confronted foreign policy challenges in the past 10 years, so to speak. Now, what does that mean, a reflective power? I think, first of all, it means to distinguish between different levels of challenges and crisis and dimensions of crisis. So the notion that Russia is interfering in Western democracies' election is also trying to engage in assassinations and targeted killings is for Germany enough to sanction Russian entities, but it is not enough for the German government to stop an energy security project such as Nord Stream 2, which is tied to a certain reality and a certain interdependence between those countries that is not intertwined with certain behavior by the Russian government. And we can see that in other realms and policy fields as well. Will that succeed and work out? I don't know. And it's possible that a change in German government in September will change this notion of being reflective and also to a certain extent being sober in their analysis of the political reality. But I think it is something that the Biden administration will experience again to a certain extent, because all those players, Wendy Sherman, she was crucial in negotiation at JCPOA, Biden and Kerry as well. They know Germany and how Germany is behaving. And I think it will be part of this new relationship to acknowledge how Germany is positioned. But as I mentioned, I think the German business sector and industry sector plays a crucial part in also directing and steering German foreign policy in the next couple of years, especially against the background of rebuilding German economy and European economy post-pandemic. So is Germany too friendly? I don't know, but maybe Germany will not be as reflective as it used to be moving forward.
Thank you so much for these answers. From what I know, Professor Heydrich also wanted to ask a question, but I'm not sure if she's still with us. Professor Heydrich?
Yes, I am with you, but I'm sorry, I won't be able to use my camera. So if it's okay, if I can just speak with the mic on, then I can ask the question that I thought of.
Yes, no problem at all. Go on.
So I wanted to direct my question to all participants, and I wanted to ask about the post-election, post-Biden election relations between the United States and Poland, but not strictly. My question is not about Poland itself, but rather about the Polish-American relations, post-Biden administration Poland relations, so to say, and the impact of those relations on the unity of the European Union. Because basically, Poland has been on the, well, I would say on the margin, on the political margin of the European Union, but I understand this is my assessment, so not everyone has to agree with it, and I assume that not everyone does. But at the same time, I think that the fact that probably the Biden administration will not be that much supportive of the current government in Poland, then ironically, I think that it can have an impact on the unity of the European Union. So I just wanted to know what is the opinion of the presenters about that, whether they think that those relations, American and Polish relations with the Biden administration, can have an impact on the European Union as such. So that would be my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. It was not directed to any presenters, but as I guess most probably Professor Zachara Szymańska would like to start. And of course, it will be also open to our presenters who would like to answer this. So let's start from Poland, from Professor Małgorzata Zachara Szymańska.
Thank you very much, Ola. Thank you very much, Professor Heydrich, for this question. So what we can expect is a conceptual vacuum, I think, and we may imagine what the strategy towards Poland from the side of the new administration would be, but what we can expect from the current Polish administration, this is unknown, because we've seen a wave of reluctance, a wave of misjudgments and missteps towards the new administration and electoral results, and this process was I mean, this process of accepting who is gonna be in charge in the White House for White House for the next 4 years was harsh for current Polish government. So we haven't seen and haven't heard as much about the strategy for the future, and I'm afraid that there is simply no strategy. So that's why it's really difficult to assess if this, you know, what was going to happen between Washington and Warsaw, and I also think that not that much is going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years between Washington and Warsaw, because there are simply two different philosophies, two different approaches to policies and to the place of Poland in the transatlantic relations. So it is difficult to assess if this is going to have impact on European Union and European unity. But what we can be sure of is that Biden administration will not be that kind in terms of, you know, gestures of appreciation for rule of law and democratic standards of Poland. So that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Anyone from presenters would like to add something? Yeah, Martin, Professor De Bruin.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think I don't think that it would bring sort of the Polish position is not going to necessarily bring the European Union close together. I think it's rather I think Poland has alienated itself to some degree, certainly not quite as much as Hungary, but to some degree in the same direction, from Europe by having a set of different, by voicing a set of different values, right? And so, you know, when Poland still has LGBTQ free zones, it's not going to be very welcome in Brussels, right? And then, but now the United States is no longer strictly transactional. You know, Biden is also a person of ideas, and so it actually, you know, alienates Poland also from American values as well as from those European values, and so it really sort of puts Poland into a separate place rather than bringing other Europeans together or creating opportunities for Poland in its relationship with the United States.
Thank you for this remark. And I just thought that maybe we should broaden this question to the whole Eastern European region, and maybe Christoph, Professor Kozak, would also like to add something to this.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how this sort of global Trumpism played out also in Czech politics. That for a long time, like right-wing parties and even some moderate right-wing politicians, they were really inspired by Donald Trump and his visions, which are basically nationalistic. So you can really relate to that. There was a lot of xenophobia that you can relate to. You can relate to that, and Trump being such a sort of powerful symbolic figure, he was able to attract some sort of attention. Even today, I think there was a there was a demonstration in the middle of Prague of Trump supporters, sort of against the inauguration, which is it was a small fringe group, but even that these sort of transatlantic links. They are real. So I think for Czech politics, the demise of Trump and the way how he exited his office served as a sort of serious blow to all those sort of Trump wannabes that were hoping that we are seeing a certain nationalistic and more autocratic trend. So I think the election now sends a clear signal that this is not automatically the way things are going to develop. But I think we have to be really careful with the potential recession that is coming up with the digital transition, with a lot of insecurity coming along. Trumpism and this type of thinking might easily make a comeback unless we use the opportunity that we have on both sides of the Atlantic.
Thank you for this remark. And as I can see, we have Alexandra Jaskulska from our department who would like to ask question. Ola?
Yes, thank you very much, Alexandra. First of all, thank you so much for a very interesting seminar. And to tell you the truth, part of my question was stolen by Rafał Latowski. The other part was stolen by Dorota. But still, there is something left, I think. Let me just tell you briefly about my background. I'm my research is dedicated to South Asia and India, but also Indo-Pacific, obviously. So I wanted to ask Cindy, like Rafał, about the lack of Chinese specialists, but Ambassador Minter answered the question. So let me go back to my second question I had. You mentioned something very interesting to me about the concept of being a specialist on Europe, how it is seen by administration, not only Biden, but also other presidents. But my question is, do you believe that Biden's administration will be more interested in developing bilateral relationships with chosen European countries like UK or Germany or France, or rather will focus on developing relationship with European Union and or through NATO? I'm just curious if you have any idea about it. What is your feeling about this? So thank you so much. That was my question.
Thank you so much. So as I understand, it was directed to Ambassador Munter, right? And also to others who would like to answer. Okay, so maybe we'll start with Ambassador this time.
I have very strong feelings about that, so thank you. I think very decidedly they will not be pursuing these special targeted bilateral relationships. You will not see Donald Trump inviting Alexander Vučić to the White House. You're not going to see the kind of things that Rick Grenell and other diplomats tried to do in Europe, where they tried to single out people. The idea of unity is also an idea of trying to figure out how to make Europe strong. And at least among the people I know in this administration, the strength is not to try to pick apart or to play favorites among the countries. That said, there is the danger. So yes, the answer is they will almost certainly go with the multilateral through the EU on economic issues and the cultural issues, and certainly with broad notions of security through NATO. That said, ironically, they will single out countries probably on human rights issues. You should know that one of the members of Congress who used to be the Assistant Secretary for Human Rights at the State Department is a young man who left Poland in the 1980s named Tomasz Malinowski, who is a congressman who is now on the Foreign Relations Committee. And he is not going to let go of human rights issues. So, you know, people like Congressman Malinowski are not going to overlook what they see as human rights issues in countries like Poland and Hungary. So the question you asked is, will there be certain bilateral singling out? Yes, but it might be negative bilateral singling out, not positive.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for this.
Thank you so much.
I leave the floor open to other panelists who would like to add something to this question. No. So we just have to wait for development of the situation. Okay, so you can see, we have Professor Gocłowska-Bolek from our department on the list. So Joanna, the floor or screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure that I can participate and ask a question to such a set of real valuable panelists. So I have two questions, in fact. The first one is maybe partly answered to direct to all of you this question about the decision of the Joe Biden administration that is not going to be taken. Something important, some important matter concerning relations with the European Union, let's say, that would shape some relations, but in your opinion is not going to be taken, and maybe why, if you think about this. And the second point is connected with my field of interest. I know that about Latin America we will have another seminar on Monday, but anyhow, taking advantage that you are here and you participate in this seminar, and maybe you will not have time to be with us on Monday, I would like to ask about your opinion about the importance of Latin America in a Joe Biden perspective now. How the role of relations with this region would shape also relations with Europe, let's say. So if you could answer some of this issue, I would be more than happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your questions, but I think that we had some problems, technical problems, when you asked your first question. So if you could briefly just repeat the first question, because I'm not sure if we all get it.
Okay. it happens with this pandemic situation a lot. So my first question was, what decision is not going to be taken? What important decision that would be somehow affecting relations with the European Union is not going to be taken by Joe Biden, and why? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone would like to start? Gordon? Oh, okay, Małgorzata raised her hand. Yeah. Okay, go on, but please unmute you.
I did it. Yeah, I thought I did it before. Sorry. Thank you for this question. And I think you're right. From my perspective, we already answered this question by discussing a little bit TTIP and other such kind of prospects. But taking this matter broader, I think what kind of vision will not be created this time during this administration because of the priorities of this administration, domestic priorities and priorities indicated by the level of destabilization of the international order, is important question regarding or important vision indicating global strategy and global place of the United States or of the West. I mean, you know, what we used to consider to be the West. So the United States and European countries together in the global perspective, and what's the role of this joint forces in shaping the future of the international order, because we are in the moment of transition. So not only in this narrow sense, we're discussing transition of the American administration now, but we are in the moment of transition in terms of what philosophy and what kind of code of conduct is going to be the rule of engagement for the future, and we still don't know it. And there is no one to tell us that, to formulate these rules of engagement. And I think something like this is really needed. So I mean, we really need a vision, a new vision, not necessarily bringing up something entirely new, but we need revigoration of our basic ideas that proved to be effective in the past, or reinvent them to be effective also in the future. But I'm afraid it is not going to happen in a foreseeable future.
Thank you so much for your answer. As I believe we still are with the first question, so maybe someone else from the panelists would like to share their views on what can be just skipped by this administration with regard to important issues. Yeah?
I just have a quick idea. I think, like, what I would like to see happen, and I think what the pandemic actually showed, but it's not going to happen, is more of an educational exchange. I think it's really, when we are really reconceptualizing some core ideas, space and sort of personal meetings matter. So it could be an impulse for a broader exchange. Of course, environmentally, it's sort of unfriendly, but if you spend like 1 year in the country, it's not that horrible as just going to New York for 3 days. But I think on both sides, like if you are thinking long term, all the people who were exposed to living in Europe or living in the US in a different country, this would really strengthen the bonds. And so far, it's exchanges exist, but it can be much much more robust, and I think, yeah, but. As always, I don't think education is going to get much priority, but I would like to see that.
Thank you so much. Yes, Martin.
Yeah, I think one area, it's actually an interesting question, right? Of course, we don't know which decision is not going to be made, but what one area that might be, or that may very well be overlooked in the process is debt relief and relationship and the relations with Africa, right? Sub-Saharan African countries. I mean, it is sort of an area that Europe has had a long history of working with African countries, but the nature that has changed of that, because obviously China has a great interest in relation to Africa. China doesn't bother them about human rights and develops ports and infrastructure and but also owns it, right? So once they build it, they get long-term leases and building its security infrastructure through these processes. And so a renewed focus on Africa would be very interesting, although I don't see that happening, but I think it would be very interesting and important for both the United States and for Europe to envision sort of a new perspective. And debt relief should definitely be part of that.
Thank you so much. I think that we can move to the second question, which was directed also, I guess, to all participants, and it referred to Latin American issues, as I understand, right? So is there anyone who would like to answer on this? I cannot see volunteers on this. So yeah.
Sorry, like, did I go again? But like, I wrote my PhD thesis on U.S.-Mexican relations, so I have.
Yeah, so that's what I thought, that maybe you will be the one to answer this.
No, and I follow closely the immigration debate, and I think that when we are talking about Latin America, immigration is becoming the hot topic. We saw it in the executive orders. Comprehensive immigration reform is on the agenda. But I think it's a nice example of how this is a sort of domestic problem with international relations. With international relations connotations. But this is what is driving many American voters, and it's going to be very difficult, the immigration reform, to pass through Congress because the Democratic majorities are so slim. So I think it's going to be a hard fight, and it's part of the broader strategy. I read Joe Biden's very ambitious plan for Central America, that he really wants to stop migration at its core, and it looks very promising. He's committed to putting money into it, but it is going to be a tough challenge. That these problems are structural, deep. There have been efforts to do something about it. There is always hope, but the limitations are there, and the good intentions as well. There will be way more pressure on Brazil and on President Bolsonaro, who is like how he is acting towards the environment. He was lucky to have Trump in the White House. Now with Biden in the White House, and a lot of the progressive Democrats really pushing the Amazon, the rainforest is a strong, symbolically strong topic. So I would expect way more frictions there, and we'll see how the situation develops with respect to Mexico, because Andrés Manuel López Obrador had surprisingly good relations with Donald Trump. Their personalities sort of matched, and Trump even got Obrador to sort of police the Guatemalan border. And to use the security forces of Mexico and as well as Guatemala to sort of police migration. So we'll see how that develops.
Thank you very much for this answer. For more reflections on Latin American issues with regard to the new administration, we need to wait till Monday, I guess, as I remember correctly. So, of course, you are all welcome to this seminar, as to any others that we plan in the next few days. But I know that we have one more question from Professor Katarzyna Kołodziejczyk from our department. So Kasia, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Ola. And I would like to congratulate, first of all participants, congratulate the great presentation and answer the questions. I hope you are not so tired to answer my last question, probably. Sorry if my question seems to you strange, because my original question have been stolen too. So I would like to ask about COVID. As you know, EU has organized global response for COVID. And in the same time, the Trump administration thought about America first idea. So those administration wasn't interested in global cooperation. So my question is, I'd like to ask if Biden administration has even mentioned about cooperation with EU against COVID. Is there any chance for transatlantic cooperation against COVID and vaccine cooperation? This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kołodziejczyk. And as you mentioned, it is most probably the last question at this seminar, but I think it might be, or maybe it should be, the first question that we should ask at the very beginning of the seminar, because it's such important topic for all countries and especially for Europe and the United States. And of course, the problem of cooperation is essential for both sides. So I would like direct this question to all participants, and maybe we'll start with Gordon.
Yes, sure. I mean, I mentioned it in the beginning. I think from a German perspective, the Biden administration, of course, brings hope, but these hopes are to a certain extent tied to German domestic politics. So everything that Germany is envisioning right now can change in September. So I think that is the most crucial dimension when considering Germany's position vis-a-vis the incoming Biden administration. And I'm skeptical whether we will see the grand coalition that we see right now in place continuing in September. I think that the Social Democratic Party will try to make a really hard and difficult campaign in order to distinguish itself from the Christian Democratic Party. And therefore, we will see a change in leadership, both in personnel, in terms of who will be the chancellor, and in terms of coalition. So I think from a German perspective, the election in September can be another turning point in the transatlantic relationship. And that is something, you know, it's fascinating from a democratic perspective, because this is how democracies work. But they are never in sync, right? So you probably have, you know, 5 or 6 months in which you have a Merkel administration that can tag along with the Biden administration and try to squeeze out something from some commitments from the Biden administration with regard to certain policy realms, but those can change in the fall quite dramatically. So that would be my more general perspective on the transatlantic relation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So it sounded like more like a closing remark from the German perspective. But if we could go back for a minute to this possible cooperation on COVID situation, Professor De Bruyn, okay, and Ambassador Munter, yes. Okay, Ambassador, go on.
Yeah, no. Tony Blinken made a comment in his testimony before the Senate that he is committed to working internationally on solutions to the COVID issue. What he probably had in mind was following up on the action that the president took the first day, which was to rejoin the WTO, the World Health Organization, sorry. So that I think what you can expect is, rather than saying, is there a European-American plan, this is on the list of things that both the Europeans and the Americans want to work on, but I think it'll be subsumed into the American re-entry into multilateral institutions. And probably this will be the example they'll use in trying to say, not only are we rejoining the World Health Organization, but we're going to do X, Y, and Z with this immediate challenge. The fact that it's one of the issues that the EU and America have decided are the top 4 issues they want to work on indicates that to me. So I think the answer is yes. There's going to be a big change, at least in statements. Whether it's successful is anyone's guess.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this answer. So just a question to the other panelists. Would you like to add something to this particular question? Yes, Professor Zahara Szymańska.
Well, maybe just a personal opinion, because my personal view is that Biden won this election because of pandemia. And if not for the pandemia, we may have been forced to face the second Trump administration. So this administration has to be very careful in presenting the results of possible interventions towards the regulating the situation, because this is of course this is the most important issue now in America, because this is a security issue. This is a public health issue. Obviously, this is a social issue and economic issue. So there is huge importance attached to this question. And if there is going to be a win, it has to be a win for this present administration to shape their position in the future. So that would be my short comment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Actually, I agree with this comment strongly, and especially with the remark that COVID helped a bit to change the administration in the United States. Thank you so much for your answers. So I think that we have 2 minutes left for last sentences as the closing remarks from the participants. So for these closing remarks, I would like to ask all of you whether you have any recommendations, what should be done to strengthen transatlantic relations under the Biden administration. So 1-2 sentences, just very, very end of our seminar. Maybe we'll start from the US, Professor De Bruyn.
Thank you. Yes. So, what should be done? So that's a good question. I think I have to go back to my concern about unity and concern about. I mean, particularly from the European side, particularly from the EU. EU needs to be able to speak with one voice and have a clear idea. And be united. They can be successful. They can achieve just about anything if they can be united. The fact that UK is no longer there should be a benefit. It should not, it should not be a downside. But that will be the essential part for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kozak.
it's difficult to give recommendations. I already spoke about the potential educational exchange initiatives that would help. But I think it's really we should use the transatlantic partnership to reinvigorate the idea that international cooperation is possible. That I think, especially with the pandemic and with the uncertain situation, how we are going to deal with the digital transformation, there is a real threat that this authoritarian-driven realpolitik is going to make a big, or it's already making a big comeback, which is a huge problem for a lot of the global problems. So, but if we are not able to demonstrate that even within the transatlantic relations, even in this sort of like a positive setting, that we are not able to come to sort of productive outcomes either in trade concerning the climate, it's going to be a really sort of sad message for our prospects. So let's not waste this opportunity, even though the real interests are at times diverging quite a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this remark. Professor Zahara Szymańska.
All right, so I'm expecting really ambitious projects for the future in terms of, conceptualizing and describing leadership, what really leadership really means in this world of uncertainty of different kinds. And I would see the United States and Europe coming together in developing some sort of concept of being a leader in terms of providing global public goods. So this investment, political and actual investment in the climate, in trade agreement, in strengthening the system, the coherence of the system. This is something that both parties, they prove that they're good at, that can be good at. But what we need is dedication to this common goals, not unilateral goals. And this is very much expected, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Friedrich, would you like to add something to your comment that you just shared with us previously? Just like a closing sentence remark.
Yeah, maybe I can. So I think in addition to the election in the US, in Germany coming up in September, I think solving more substantial trade issues between the US and the EU and Germany is something that should have priority. Also because I think that global competition, especially between the US and China, is different in the 21st century than it used to be in the 1990s or throughout the 20th century. It's much more on economic grounds, on the question of innovative capacity and so forth, new technologies and so forth. So I think that solving trade disputes and cooperation in development of new technologies, I think, is something that could be a vision for transatlantic relations going forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And Ambassador Munter.
I won't keep you much longer. I would just say be patient. The way that this administration will work is meant to be deliberate. It's meant to be slow. I hope the European and the American publics will simply be patient, both with their own leadership and with the leadership of the other countries.
Okay, thank you very much for this very short closing remark. So we can wish all of us patience, right, with regard to transatlantic relations and with regard to most probably to other issues connected with foreign policy, because as we agreed, I think the first thing that the new administration will concentrate on will be the domestic part and domestic area. So let's just close our great discussion. Thank you very much, all presenters, all experts who agreed to take part in this discussion. Thank you for your remarks. Thank you for your answers. And of course, thanks to all the audience and participants who joined us on Zoom. Thank you for your excellent questions. And I hope to see you all. And I, of course, invite you all to our other seminars. We start tomorrow at 9:30 with Asian Vision. So if you are interested in this region, please join us tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning. And then for Latin American issues on Monday and the Middle East on Tuesday. So thank you very much for today, and hope to see you all for other seminars. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I learned a lot. So thank you for that.